What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, January 2nd edition of the NBA Lineup Generator video. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. We have another 6-game NBA slate tonight. Not a lot of injury news that we're waiting on, so hopefully this one ends up being pretty straightforward. Obviously, it is the NBA, so there is still a chance, a relatively good chance, that something breaks between now and lock and the slate ends up looking entirely different. But for right now, we're not really waiting on much news. We don't have a Charlotte injury report yet, so that could certainly change things. But as of now, looking like a pretty straightforward 6-game slate, a couple of pay-up options, plenty of good mid-range plays, and we're going to take a look at all of that using the lineup generator for both DraftKings and FanDuel. But first, make sure that you like this video, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Twitter. That helps us out quite a bit. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you get an alert when our shows go live. Now, we are going to start on the DraftKings side, and as always, our first option here is to choose the type of lineup that we want to see. We can see all different lineup types, chalky lineups, balanced lineups, contrarian lineups, whatever you're looking for. We recommend basing this off of the contest size that you're playing. In your larger field stuff, you're going to be more likely to want contrarian lineups. In smaller field stuff, you should be looking more at the chalkier lineups. For this video, I am going to select contrarian lineups, and then you have the opportunity to lock in a player. I'm not going to do that for this video. I don't recommend doing it if you're playing a lot of lineups, but if you're only playing a lineup or two and there's someone that you know that you want, you can very easily save yourself some time by just clicking on their name here. You can sort by optimal percentage, projection, boom percentage, whatever you want in determining that player. I'm going to skip it. And that gets us to our next screen where we are presented with lineups. Now, if you're not aware of what the lineup generator does or how it works, what this tool is doing is it is utilizing our player projections, our ownership projections, our simulation models. It's using those on the back end, doing all of the work for you, and then presenting you with individual lineups that we project to be profitable in the long run. Within that individual lineup, at the top, you can see the salary, the fantasy projection, and the ownership projection. For each player, you can see that information as well. And then down at the bottom, you have sliding scales that show you how it ranks in terms of optimal percentage and contrarian percentage, or contrarian versus chalky, I guess I should say. You can see this one is still relatively chalky, but you do have a couple of sub 10% owned guys. These scales or these sliders are useful in that the fantasy projection, the ownership projection, the raw numbers there, they can be interesting to look at, but they're not really telling you a lot. It's more so how it compares to alternative lineups. So we can see that, this one is relatively chalky, but looking at the individual players, it's still contrarian enough. It projects relatively well. Looks like a pretty good lineup overall. Now on this screen, you also do have the ability to customize your lineups. You don't have to just play the ones that are given to you. Let's say you look at a lineup and you really like the lineup overall, but there's one or two players that you don't like. Maybe you're looking at this one and you don't want to play $7,100 Keldon Johnson off the bench. You can click these arrows over here on the right-hand side, and it's going to show you all of the small forward options. Scroll down to Keldon Johnson's price, and you can swap him out for guys priced around him. So maybe you'd rather go Jalen Williams than Keldon Johnson. You can still see right here that Jalen Williams is only 7% owned, so he's still a good contrarian play. You can swap him out for Johnson. It will also leave you with $300, so you could swap up somewhere else if you're so inclined. So you can swap these lineups around, customize them, make them your own, while still using the general foundation that was presented to you. And then once you have a lineup you like, click save. If you get one that you just really don't like, click discard and you get another one. Now, keep in mind, every lineup that you're being presented with is projected to be a profitable lineup in the long run. So save the ones that you like the most. And then we can get to the next screen where you can very easily see your player exposures. And going back to what I just said about keeping in mind that the lineups you're presented with are profitable, this is a screen that you should pay a lot of attention to, because if you're getting more of a player than you want, particularly if it's a player that is really volatile, there's nothing wrong with lowering your exposure to that player and going back to the previous screen and selecting lineups that don't have him, because again, every lineup you select is going to project to be profitable. So it's about managing your risk tolerance, your exposures on this page. For example, Kenrich Williams, 3,300, not a great play by any stretch, likely to play 16 to 18 minutes tonight. He is opening things up in other parts of your lineup. So he's showing up in 35% of the lineups I selected. You certainly don't need 35% of him. So if you decide that you don't want to invest that much money into Kenrich Williams, all you have to do from this screen is click Kenrich Williams' name. It's going to highlight all of your Kenrich Williams lineups over here. You can find the ones that you like the least, whether that's by projection, ownership, some other metric that you want to use. Discard the ones that you like the least, and I'm going to get him from 35% down to, let's say, 20% by just deleting 3 lineups there, going back to the previous screen by clicking Get More Lineups, and then selecting 3 lineups that do not have Kenrich Williams to replace the ones that I just got rid of. And now we go back to the previous screen, and you can see that we are down to 20% of him. Now, you may have to do that more than once, because when you start losing Kenrich Williams, maybe, for example, you start getting more Case and Wallace, which is basically the same play. So you may have to tinker around with that a little bit, but it's very easy for you to adjust your exposures until you're comfortable with everything that you're getting. And then you can export to CSV and enter to, in this case, DraftKings, or if you're playing on FanDuel using the FanDuel lineup generator, then FanDuel. Looking at the players we're actually getting to right now, Chris Paul showing up 70% of the time. Nothing particularly surprising there. He is likely to be the most popular, or one of the most popular players on the slate. He's now a starter for Golden State. He played 32.5 minutes last game. Similarly, Trayce Jackson-Davis played 29 minutes in his start last game. Steve Kerr said that they will be continuing to use that starting lineup, at least for the short-term future. So $4,600 Jackson-Davis looks very good. Domantas Sabonis in a solid spot against the Hornets. $9,700 center, showing up 35% of the time. Franz Wagner's playing huge minutes for the Magic. He's also only $7,500. He is also in 35% of our lineups. Then we get to an $8,200 Desmond Bane, which looks great. Good matchup against the Spurs. Shooting guard, small forward eligible. Bismack Biyombo is a little bit more questionable. He has been starting at center for Memphis. He was benched at halftime 2 games ago, but then started the next game, played about 18 minutes in the first half before only playing 3 minutes in the second half. He's very volatile in terms of his playing time. He's not a great point per minute guy, but he is cheap. He has averaged about 20.5 minutes per game in the 6 games that he has played with John Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. this year. With the limited value on the slate, it does make some sense to just hope for the best, getting to Biyombo in a good matchup. Joel Embiid returning tonight for the Sixers, and on DraftKings, he is at the cheapest price tag that we have had since November 8th against the Celtics. Tonight, he is playing the Bulls. The Bulls are the slowest team in the league, so that isn't ideal. But overall, 1.9 DraftKings points per minute for Embiid this year. He looks great if you can get to him. Mikal Bridges at 7,200 looks like a reasonable contrarian play. Projected around 10% ownership. We're getting to 25%. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has a tough matchup with Boston, but there are some pretty big spreads tonight. The Oklahoma City game is not one of them. 2 of the best teams in the NBA, likely to be competitive. Maybe we get an extra minute or 2 on top of the 35 minutes per game that SGA averages for the season. Case and Wallace showing up 25% of the time. If this were a set of lineups that I'm entering, I probably would lower that a bit, but he's just a cheap value where he's probably playing around 22 minutes, and you're just hoping to get lucky because the rest of your lineup around him should look pretty good. Then we get to Zion and Marcus Smart 25% of the time as well. Now, we are going to switch over and do the same thing for FanDuel. But first, if you're watching this video and you haven't already signed up to use the lineup generator, I highly recommend doing so using the link below, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Twitter. This is the most cost-effective way to get access to our data, our projections, our simulation models, all of that. Like I explained before, it's utilizing all of that and presenting lineups to you at the end that are projected to be profitable using that data and that information. Most cost-effective way to get access to it. We created this tool with the single entry, 3 max, 20 max, lower stakes players in mind, because it can be very, very difficult to improve at DFS at those stakes without spending so much money on data and tools that it's impossible for you to profit. So this is available for $14.95 per week. Highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. Use the link below. Now, looking at FanDuel, we are once again going to choose contrarian lineups and not lock anyone in. And then I'm going to save the first 20 lineups that show up. And we can take a look at how our exposures differ compared to DraftKings. I accidentally saved 21. So on this screen, I can just delete the bottom one. And we now have 20 lineups over here. 65% Sabonis. He was showing up a lot on DraftKings. He looks very good regardless of site, but he looks much better on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings because he's only $300 more expensive on FanDuel, but he has power forward eligibility. So much less opportunity cost in a good matchup. Chris Paul, great play on either site. Cody Martin showing up a lot for us right now. Should get decent minutes off the bench for the Hornets. If they are more shorthanded than expected, then he'll obviously look even better. But he played about 25 minutes yesterday. I expect similar playing time today, assuming that the same people that played yesterday play today. Trayce Jackson-Davis, power forward eligibility at 5,600, showing up 55% of the time. Then we're getting to Brandon Miller, Ish Smith, Miles Bridges, all from the Hornets at relatively inexpensive price tags for the playing time that we can expect. Brandon Miller played 32 minutes in 3 quarters yesterday. He didn't need to play the fourth, but he was tracking to play a lot of minutes if that game was competitive. Tonight's game certainly could be a blowout as well, but if it's competitive, you're probably getting a lot of minutes from Miller. Even if he only plays around 30 at 6K, that's going to look decent. Ish Smith got the start, played 29 minutes yesterday at 3,700. Still a good value there. Miles Bridges started, played 36 minutes in the blowout loss. There is massive minute upside for these guys. Chris Duarte, $3,700, showing up 35% of the time as well. He moved in to the Kings starting lineup last game in place of Kevin Huerter, expecting him to play around 25 minutes or so if he starts again tonight. We're getting to a 5K Herb Jones at 30%, $5,800 Malik Monk against his former team, 30% of the time as well, along with a 7K Jalen Williams against the Celtics. And then finally, we're rounding things out with 25% of Nick Richards, again, going back to the Hornets there in a risky spot, but a potentially really good spot against the Kings if they are able to keep this game close, as they are shorthanded. Terry Rozier is unlikely to play today, and we know that LaMelo Ball is out and Mark Williams not playing either. So there's the potential for a lot of goodness from the Hornets. You just have to deal with that blowout risk. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for checking out the video. Good luck on your lineups tonight, and I'll see you back here again tomorrow.